I don't know periods. Like, I think that's what I've learned throughout this whole like podcast experience. Everything's an and.
Mhm.
Hello and welcome to Frequency Broads. I am Victoria and I'm joined with my co-host Tara. And we are joined today by the lovely Danae, who is the host of The Conscious Communion, a really wonderful podcast we highly recommend you checking out. Danae, welcome.
Hello. It's such an honor to be here with you both. I met you via the wonderful world of social media and was also so deeply drawn to your podcast and what you're bringing through. And you can tell that it's really coming through source and really coming through the divine. So I'm so grateful to be here with you both today.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited to have you because today we're talking about celebration of culture. So maybe we should start with a little bit of a freak check to see how we're feeling. I'd love for Danae to start. Danae, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling better than I have been. I was sick all week, and I think so many of us are coming out of this big rebirthing death cycle. And I was certainly one of those people. There's been a lot of transitions that have been going on in my world, and I got so sick on Wednesday and woke up and my body was like, girl, chill. And there was just this huge recalibration that got to take place with resting and recovering. And yeah, so I'm feeling much more aligned in my energetic field today, which feels good. My voice is still figuring itself out, but I'm here and I'm grateful to be here. So, yeah.
Amazing. Happy that you're feeling better.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Victoria, what about you, girl? How you feeling?
My heart's feeling very full. I feel rested, content. I went up to the mountain this weekend and spent the weekend with really wonderful people who made delicious, yummy, nourishing food and got to play lots of shuffleboard and gin rummy. And I love expressing my competitive side with my loved ones because they'll still love me at the end of the day. And I was just reminded of how necessary it is to be in nature and to breathe fresh air and to see new sights and gain new perspectives. And so I'm feeling super grateful and full in my heart. How are you feeling, my love?
I am right on track with y'all. I am feeling a little tired. I've had a busy weekend, but all good things, of course. I have also been through a pretty big transition recently. I feel like it's been ramping itself up for the past couple months. And, after eclipse season, now we're just trying to integrate it all. And I've had a lot more opportunities come in to bring in some financial security, but that also brings a lot more on my plate. So just trying to stay grounded myself. And I love what you said, Victoria, about new places for new perspective. And that's, I think, why I get so caught up on going to like the same parks or the same walk all the time. I'm like, I know this is Earth, but I need something different. So just really trying to stay rested and grounded. And so that way my head is clear in order for me to take care of what I need to.
I think before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic, I want to start off by saying that this idea was born out of a need to express and acknowledge this holiday that this episode is coming out on, Thanksgiving. I've never been a fan of this holiday since I was a little girl. It never felt right. It just screamed hypocrisy. It screamed BS. I'm not a huge fan of the food either, so I guess that was another reason for me to not get excited. And I think we're in this point now where we've heard so much about colonialism and white supremacy and whitewashing and cultural appropriation. And so I'd really like today's episode to be focused on cultural appreciation and what that looks like, what that feels like. How do we do it in a way that's respectful and honorable? And I think we all have different ways going about it, but I think we're all descendants of different genetics, different ethnicities and cultures. And so taking a moment to celebrate it and act out, I think, what I'm trying to achieve here by having us come together and share our stories and honor who we are as individuals.
Mm.
Hmm.
So good. I love that so much. I think even in before just talking with you both, there's such a beautiful covering over this conversation, I believe, because there has been such an emphasis on the separation piece where I believe that it's necessary for us to move into what bonds us. And we know
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, w- if we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And at the
Mm.
utmost importance, we belong to each other because we are a part of the human race and we are here on
Mm-hmm.
this earth to steward the earth itself. And so, how lucky are we to be able to celebrate our differences and then to hopefully steward the earth in the process of doing so?
Mm.
So,
So beautifully said.
yes, yes. And I think in the sentiment of us stewarding the earth together, we're all three grateful to live here in what is now called Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah County. And this is the ancestral lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Kathlamet, Clackamas, Kaulets, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the past, present, and future of your tribes. And we honor and deeply respect all that you are.
I know as I was getting prepared for this episode, as I always do, I light a candle and I usually call in my guides to help me channel in whatever is most needed for the consciousness right now. And right after that, I was like, oh, yeah, guide, you're here. But more importantly, what I'm calling in is the people of this land, the ancestors of this land, the ancestors of myself, all the other versions of me and other timelines that are living in other cultures that I can help unify and bring to the forefront in a appreciative way. Hence why I have all my eyes on today. Got my eyeball earrings, I got my eyeball hat, my regular eyeballs. So I'm like, I'm ready to see from all perspectives and bring that unification together. Because like you were saying, Danae, the opposite of separation is unification. And we've been seeing time after time after time that we're just constantly being divided. And personally, I feel that those big times of division are big times of awakening. And there's this duality that's happening. So as we're awakening, then there's this separation here to give us the opportunity to really step into that unification and say, okay, I'm seeing us pulling apart. How do we unify, like you said, as one human race and know that we are all connected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we belong to each other. It's like, I think it's so fun to just know that Homo sapiens were only 300,000 years old. Like, and as a species, the Earth itself is 4.5 billion years old. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
conceptually understanding that we have a lot to learn from the Earth itself to just be advocates of being here and living here and co-collaborating with the land in itself. That's what is such an, I mean, we have an incredible opportunity there
Mm-hmm.
because all of our people, wherever our ethnicities originate from, there was indigenous practices for all of us. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we come back to the remembrance of those practices by however that may be for us, whether it be prayer or, calling our guides, we can come back to that remembrance and revitalize that in itself to then usher in a new earth. I'm really
Mm.
in belief of that.
Absolutely. What I've been really getting downloads about is just that, right? It's taking that unification, whether it be internally, right? Uniting in yourself, becoming whole within yourself, or finding finding unification in community or partnership. That's going to ping the earth grid and send out this frequency that is going to relay the grid for the next version of Earth, for this next evolution that we've been preparing for since the first Homo sapiens took its step, or took a breath. Um, And I love that you mentioned the time scale about Earth, like, oh, it was only this and this. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to conceptualize that timeline. But something that we've been talking a lot at school that I wanted to share with you that I think is so amazing is my two directors brought this concept up of, if we assume that each generation, each mother is having her child around 25, right? That's like the average. You can conceptualize time on how many mothers. So I
Mm.
did a little math before and I was like, okay, like the air quotes, like first Thanksgiving, right? Like that's when this date comes out. That was only 16 mothers ago. And when you think about it
Wow.
like that, and you think about how you carry the energetic blueprint of your ancestors for 7 years, that's only 2 cycles of energy, and that's not saying that you've transmuted it and it's shifted. You could still be holding on to the energetics of your ancestors who were around for that date in 1621. Or even if you're thinking about how we talked about this with Kelsey, Dr. Kelsey, how when I get pregnant, my child, if it's a girl, her eggs, I have my grandchild inside me. That DNA is connected. So from that, it's only five of those cycles that have happened. And when you really start to think about it that way and you include your ancestors in on that and you say, okay, 16 mothers ago, they went through this huge shift, this huge traumatic shift. That wasn't that long ago. We put so much distance on things and we don't think they affect us, but they really do. And when we start to look at how close, especially energetically, like right now, we are setting that grid for 20 daughters from now. It's crazy to think of that way.
Mm. I love that. It's so beautiful to really like lean into that, and to even just all of us, the three of us, we have all done a lot of inner work. And
Mhm.
so to know that we're doing the work to break these generational cycles, and we've taken it into the cognizance of our own mind, body, and spirit, that it's our this is our own due diligence that we get to take upon ourselves to potentially clear out some of that generational trauma, to
Mhm.
again usher in something different for our beloveds, our children that we may bear into the world someday.
And that unification now, we are the living ancestors. We will soon be the ancestors
Mm-hmm.
that have walked this land. So when we start to plant that seed of unification, that is rippling out
Mm.
7 generations down, 3 DNA cycles down. It's so amazing to think about the work that you do for yourself, and the consciousness is affecting so much down, but also so much before you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the idea of a rippling effect too, because it's not only our generations that will come after us, but it's everyone that they'll interact with as well.
Mhm.
So, what a gift if they can mirror something new to someone else. Wow. Well, and like that would be such a gift to be able to. I mean, we can imagine it for ourselves. And I believe that that's an important piece to the puzzle, right? Seeing it as already so that we
Mhm.
can come into the belief that that will be how we birth a new earth, and how we come into this new awakened phase for
Mhm.
generations to come.
Mhm.
So, what are we going to create? What does this new earth look and feel like?
Mm. Hmm. Got to breathe into that one.
Mhm.
I think so much of it is not living in fright or flight. There's there's been, I mean, I think so many of us that are doing the work, we're coming into the understanding that it's okay to feel safe in our bodies. And
Mhm.
our ancestors didn't feel that for whatever reason. But now we're coming into the cognizance that we can go through the processes to look at our shadow, to look at the hard places and spaces within our own lives, to face it with courage, and then potentially just move through some of that cellular degeneration that's happened over centuries, right? Like
Mhm.
that has been passed on to us, talking about cells and DNA. that moves through cycles. And
Absolutely.
so to take out the fear from our cells and to transmute it with love and safety and trust and courage. Wow, what a new earth that would be.
Yeah. And that's that internal unification, right? Because we're not
Mhm.
saying this shadow is bad and I'm shaming this part of me and I'm getting
Mhm.
rid of it. It's saying, I'm going to bring this into love and I'm going to say, wow, I can only imagine or I can tap into and see what you have gone through and why you're expressing yourself this way. But let's come together and stand together in love
Mm.
inside ourselves and make choices from that decision. So, for me, yeah, the new earth is all about that. It's all about unification. It's about knowing that we are simultaneously unique and all one,
Mm,
right? We
mm,
all
mm,
come with a medicine, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. So if we all are able to shine our medicine brightly, like then the picture is formed. Then we're in
mm,
this new earth and we're able to work together.
mm. So good and so beautifully said. Yeah. It's it's really I love the idea when I heard you say unification of the shadow and just really honoring. I what I heard was like coming to the altar. It's like coming to the altar of our lives and really just sitting with all of ourselves and not being ashamed of any of it because there's
Mm.
nothing to be afraid of. When we look at ourselves with pure love, that's the juice. That's the
Mhm.
nectar. That's the good stuff.
Mhm. And when you feel that, you're ready to give that to somebody else. You're ready to
Mm.
share that and say, "Oh my gosh, I
Mhm.
have all this," right? Like anytime we're really happy, what do we want to do? We want to giggle with someone. We want to give that to them. And we don't recognize that just by filling our own cup and feeling that love, like it's effortless to give to others. It's when we're in this
Yeah.
scarcity mindset, this separation, there's not enough I need to have for my own because we're not all one, there, that we begin to not make that connection.
Mhm.
I'd
Mm.
like us to regain faith in humanity again, if it ever existed in the first place. And to me, what that really looks like, I've been, trust has been a big challenge for me throughout my entire life, but specifically, Scorpio season just brings it all up for me to face in all its beauty and horror. But having faith that there are going to be leaders, there are going to be people who do the right thing, and that they already exist and we are them and we're here to support the others and that we all have a place to contribute in our own unique way through our own unique energetic blueprint. And
Mm.
I would love to see more and more people have a taste of unity, to understand how potent and powerful it can be as a tool to healing us, to healing the collective, to healing the earth, and more so our relationship and reciprocity to the earth.
Yeah, 1,000%. I was talking to my husband about this last night. Just this, I think that there's this overarching theme amongst society. There's a divide, right? And you can feel the duality, and it's a
Mhm.
lot. You can feel it. It's thick. It's tangible. And so, using this time as a catalyst to have faith and to believe and to hope and to trust that there is going to be people that will steward this earth, including ourselves, and putting the onus upon ourselves to each do our own due diligence. Like that, may we all carry the torch for ourselves and then model
Mm.
it just by being us, not by telling anyone to do anything, but by us being us. And then may we
Yes.
be the mirrors for the next person.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking when Victoria was saying, like, oh, the new leaders are us. The new leaders are already here. But the three of us are not standing outside forcing people to do anything or trying to have a certain view. We're just embodying that. We're embodying that unity. We're embodying that hope, that faith. Um, Victoria and I were talking the other day and kind of looking at the concept between, although they're like basically the same word, shifting from trust to faith
Mm,
could be so expansive. And I think it's hard to step into that because of oppression from organized religion that takes that word. But someone brought this up to me recently about like wanting to take these words back and saying like, no, like
Mhm.
even if you're using the word God and it's not the depiction of God that they led us to be, and it's really universe or source or whatever, just being able to take back that word and not feel the ick. So
Mm,
I'm
mm,
feeling that with faith. And Victoria and I talked about how trust almost feels, or at least for me, the word trust almost feels stagnant. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to trust based on like maybe my past. And like for me, it's almost looking backwards or just right here. Whereas faith is like, I have faith this is going to work out. Versus
mm,
I trust it's going to work out. To me, there's some kind of vibrational switch in that word where like faith, I release. I'm like, no, I just have faith. I don't need any truth behind. I don't need any facts behind it. Where truth, the word truth with my data driven brain is like, well, where's the facts that it is
mm,
true? Right. So I love leaning into that word of faith and saying, like, I do have faith
mm,
that things can change because I see it in myself that I've changed. And in being able to unify and appreciate all cultures, like we were just saying, I think it starts with ourselves. When we can stop judging ourselves, we can stop judging others. And I know for me, when it comes to culture, um, I'm pretty much 50-50 Irish and Italian. And my mom was, both of my parents are very proud of their background. And my mom like really went into the Celtic, mystical side of things. And I really like, I use that all the time, like all the traditions and things from there. But because of the trauma and experience that I've had from my other side of the family, I've completely disconnected from that. And I think in order for me to honor all cultures, I need to first honor the ones that I come from and feel
mm,
accept myself that like, yes, I might have gone through this turmoil in this lifetime with this person, right? It doesn't mean the culture. It's similarly to like when people are like, oh, these people are like this, right? That experience doesn't mean it equates to everyone. So I needed to step back. And that's something just this year that I'm starting to take back for myself. And it started with Samhain and actually putting something to honor my Strega side, my Italian side, and be like, okay, you know what? I want you at the table. You are honored. You are special. You are a part of me. And once we can start to feel that in who we are incarnated now, we can then start to look outside ourselves and say, you know what? If I can accept this part of me that maybe I didn't accept before, I can now start to look outward and say, well, what's the difference between accepting this other person?
mm. 1,000%. I've had to work very hard with that myself with my grandfather and just feeling angry for like the cutting off of cultural information and knowledge. I
Mhm.
learned at his funeral that he grew up on the reservation. I didn't even know that he grew up on the reservation. And so to feel embittered because I had always felt such a deep longing to know my Native American culture and to know the history and story that was there, I
Mhm.
was embittered for a very long time. And it didn't come until I took it upon myself to learn the stories of my people without potentially having to learn it from him. I had
Mhm.
to do it by myself, and that's okay. And it was almost that in itself was a privilege, right? There's so many people that don't have the opportunity to have that kind of information, to find the stories out for themselves. And while they're not coming straight from someone's, you know, mouth, it's still I get to do the research for myself and lean into the practices and the rituals that potentially my people were able to practice as a form of medicine for themselves. And
Mhm.
it's that it goes back to the whole, I think what I keep hearing is like a reclamation. This is a
Mhm.
reclamation that we get to come into for ourselves.
Mhm. Have you seen a big shift, like once you were able to learn more about your culture and your ancestors, like in your own practice? And yeah.
Huge, huge, absolutely. Yeah, and I actually even started to, because even my Mexican ancestry, my family's been here for a really long time in the United States. So assimilation really didn't allow them to speak Spanish, and it was like,
Mm.
they were hit in school when they would speak Spanish. And I'm learning Spanish now. And for
Mm.
a long time, I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, it wasn't passed down to me. Like, again, feeling embittered, letting
Mhm.
myself feel the divide and the duality. And instead, it's like, what does it look like to embrace that part of myself? And if I want to learn it, then taking the onus upon myself to embody it and to let it become a part of who I want to be here on earth, to steward to my potential children
Mm.
this cultural information that I wish that I had. Well, if I
Mhm.
wish that I had it, well, why can't I have it?
Mhm.
Right? It's like, I think so many of us want to be embittered. And I think that the rage is helpful. This is like what you were talking about in the very beginning, Victoria. I think it's helpful. There's a time and a place, of course. And it's not to negate anything or any experience that anyone has gone through. And also, what does it look like to celebrate and to move forward?
Mhm.
Integrating the past with the present and the future. And what does it look like to do that?
Absolutely, because when you're feeling embittered or resentment, because I have that same track record when it comes to my lineage, we're not only feeling it because we are longing for that peace, but we're also feeling it because, like I was just saying, that connection to our ancestors is so much closer than we think. So you're tapping into your ancestors who were not allowed to, and feeling that anger and that fight against it. But because you are allowed to, it almost responds to that fight against not wanting to, right? I won't do that. Like, no, 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 right? But really what's happening is it's that same emotion, it's that same energy and frequency coming in. You're able to now shift that and say, okay, I feel you, and that's totally understandable and valued. But let's take that and say, but if you want it, you have it. If that's
Hmm.
what you're looking for, it's yours.
When Tara and I first started Frequency Broads earlier this year, which feels wild to say that this has all happened within a year, we met with someone who has a successful podcast for guidance, just tips, tricks, whatever. And she said something to us that it's screaming at me right now, because she goes, you two are two white girls talking about spiritual concepts. Who are you to talk about spirituality? And are you prepared to be criticized for being two white girls talking about topics that might belong to other cultures, or practices that belong to other cultures? Like, how are you going to be prepared for that? And I'm glad she presented us with that perspective. But it got me thinking that our trauma and our pain is not a competition. We are not here to prove, well, I come from this lineage and they endured this trauma. Therefore, I have some like, it's all awful and we're done with it. Like, we are done treating we're done treating humans this way. Like, it needs to stop, and we need to stop celebrating and, I guess, competing against who has the most trauma. It's so backwards to me that I just want to bring that up, because my father is Romanian. He immigrated to the States when he was a teenager. My great grandfather died in the Holocaust. And for the longest time, couldn't really conceptualize. My family's not Jewish. He was just part of, the soldiers fighting against the Nazis. And, it made me realize how many other people just trying to do the right thing get brought down with, fighting the good cause. And um, it, it just it anytime I hear anyone bring up anything around the Holocaust, my heart kind of sinks into my stomach, because it's like, do you even acknowledge all of the other races and cultures and people that tried to prevent what happened, um, or stop what was happening? And then here we are today witnessing just horrific acts that we feel so guilty for continuing to live our lives and celebrate the good things happening in our personal lives, because there's absolute hell happening for other people. And we can't deny that the extreme duality and the extreme polarity is allowing us to face our shadows and to reach these points in our evolution where we can say enough is enough and we can't continue this on any longer. But I think the inherent guilt of the good things happening to us who are privileged not to be experiencing these horrific acts against humanity, it's deep right now.
It's super deep. And I think that's what's so important is also recognizing that even while we do have privilege, okay, well, now we get to do the work. And so that's what we do with our privilege,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
We do the work for the people that can't, that
Yes.
literally
Mhm.
fucking can't. And so how lucky are we that we get to steward this for the generations to come within our own sphere?
Mhm.
That is a beautiful gift in itself.
Mhm. And two things come up when you say that, Victoria and Danae. One is about like what's happening right now and being able to do the work for those who can't. Um we haven't talked much about it on social media. We haven't talked much about it on the podcast because even thinking about it, I can cry right now and it's very potent. It's very real. And I think we got so caught up from like 2020 and probably even before with this performative, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but just like performative justice, I guess, where they're like, if I share this and tell you that you should be paying attention, then I did the work. And like that is helpful because maybe someone didn't know, but ultimately, are you really having the conversations? Are you really doing your inner work that's affecting the consciousness? Are you inviting that conversation to those who maybe aren't aware? You just posting on Instagram or shaming other
Mhm.
people, that's just like, why didn't you post this? This is hard. This is really hard for a lot of people, and to like laissez fit, that's not the word, laissez faire,
Laissez faire.
whatever,
Yeah.
however, yeah, there you go. Like to just like casually be like, here's another traumatic post, like that's hard for people to see, especially when they know people there or they're experiencing it so close to home. And I think on the other side, what you brought up for me is this, when you mentioned how we're two white women talking about spirituality. Yes, that's true. Absolutely. And we do try to make aware that, at least in our own practice, maybe not when we're talking about it so much, but in our own practice, we are always giving respect and honoring where like this lineage came from. But that right there is another, not by this person's conscious, but is another tactic of division,
Mhm.
right? Because that's not your culture. You can't talk about it and do it. And that's not necessarily true. If we're learning about it, like Danae, I mean, that is your culture, but you learned about it. You didn't hear it from your ancestors, from their mouth. You went out and seeked that information. And yes, it is a part of you, but that was your choice to do that. And I think as we learn about unification, it's not about saying, well, that's yours and this is mine. It's saying, this is what each of us is bringing to the earth. And how can we take that, what resonates with us, meld that with our medicine, but always paying respect to where that came from, whether that be in prayer. My ancestors and other cultures that I work with always tell me to give an offering, whether that be like verbal offering, or something on my altar, or some kind of movement, right? It's a way of saying thank you, I respect you, and I'm so grateful that you found this medicine and you brought it to light, and I'm going to meld it with mine, and thank you for giving that to me. So even that question, although it comes from a good place of be mindful of what you're doing so you're not harming other cultures, it's actually just continuing to separate us.
Mhm. Mhm. The separation piece is huge, and that's like literally the antithesis of what we need right now. We do not need more separation. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need it. Antithesis. Hold on. Is that the right word? I'm trying to
Yes,
think.
it is.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm like, right?
that's me all the time. I'm like,
I was
what?
like, I know that it is, and I just second guessed myself for a quick second, but um, it's the antithesis of what we need. We
Mm-hmm.
need to come together, and by embodying ourselves fully, wholly, and completely, and by accepting every shadow and each nook and cranny, we have a greater opportunity to do the same for our neighbor. And
Mm.
so, by attuning to each and every uncomfortable thing that comes up within us, each trigger, right? That gives us the allowance to then
Mm.
give someone the space to be exactly who they are, even when the triggers come up, and just, again, stay in that faithful reciprocity and that
Mm.
place of, I am safe in my experience. And even if this person is treating me some kind of way, I'm going to stay embodied in my truth because this is what I came here to do. Not to
Mm.
be reactive, not to create more division, but to say, I'm going to embody love and intention and purpose in my being right now as I receive whatever this person is bringing towards me. And that in itself is the model. That in itself is the permission for the next person to say, maybe I didn't need to react like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's try it a different way.
Absolutely. I tell my students all the time, you understanding and hearing out someone's opinion doesn't devalue your own. So
Mm.
it's the same with culture or just any kind of understanding or thing that you're bringing up. Even if it's not something you're a medicine you're going to mend with yourself, it's saying, "Oh, I understand that and I value that." And that doesn't take away from who or what I am and what I'm experiencing. I'm able to say what you're going through is valid. What you experience, what you're bringing to the table is valid even if I'm not agreeing with it.
Hmm.
And fact of the matter is, I think going back to the whole spirituality and us being two white broads on here talking about energy, and it's not, spirituality is not exclusive to a religion, a culture. If you have a soul, if you are a human with consciousness, it applies to you. Period.
Mhm.
We're spiritual beings living a human experience.
Isn't it so
All of
fun?
us.
Aren't we so glad we signed up for this?
We're so lucky. I think it's,
Woo.
it's funny. I've been like, I am a bit of a science nerd. So I've been just like doing some fun research on nerdy earth things. And so to think about the earth, and I mentioned earlier, it's 4.5 billion years old, but we are one of the youngest planets in our galaxy. And we don't know anything about what's going on in the other galaxies. And so to
Mhm.
know that the oldest planet in our galaxy is like 13.2 billion years old, like, humble yourself.
Yes.
Humble yourself. When you start to create division and when you start to judge the next person for whatever the next thing is that you're going to judge them for,
Mhm.
maybe just take a pause and realize that you don't need to take yourself so seriously. You don't need to take the thing so seriously. Take a breath. Remember
Mhm.
that this is a gift to be here. And
Absolutely.
I don't mean that from like a judgmental place. I really don't, because I've been there. I've been the person that's been reactive. This is only
Mhm.
me speaking from experience.
Mhm.
I look at young me and I'm like, oh, honey.
Yeah.
Oh, honey. You just got to breathe.
Yeah.
You just got to breathe. And so much of it isn't anyone's fault, right? It's the repatterning and the deprogramming that needs to happen for us to
Mhm.
actually feel safe.
Yeah. And I think it's just this pendulum swing that we've been working on, right? So, like, there was all this whitewashing of culture and just like completely wiping people out of history. So, we went the completely other way where we're like, okay, only those cultures should be talking about that. And we shouldn't be looking like that and doing that and whatever, because that's not our space to do it. But that's still separate. We need to come to that center point where everybody's at the table and everyone gets to talk about everything together, because that's how we gain perspective. When we close our
Mm.
doors and say, well, we're two white women and we can only talk about what white people know, then we're not gaining any perspective. We're not sharing anything with each other. We're just reliving the same experience. We need to have everyone at the table. There
Mm.
was a message that came through when I was meditating, and I'll just read you what I wrote. Um, Be fiercely loyal to your tribe while also upholding your unique talent. So when that came through, I was like, oh, like that seems, and then I was like, oh, tribe as humans.
Mm.
Be loyal to the human race. Be loyal to Earth. Fiercely loyal to its growth and just resonance and joy and like freaking peace. Um, Without getting rid of your uniqueness, being that
Mm.
unique person at the table and saying, this is what I am bringing to the table. This is what I've experienced. It's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just what I know. And I'd love to see your perspective on it.
Yeah, something that's been coming through really clearly for me the past couple months is letting go of the attachment and the expectation to whatever the thing is, right? And
Mhm.
it's like so much of that is having expectations for people, like drop it.
Mhm.
It's not going to help. I think that there's important boundaries maybe that can help us to that we can articulate. Of course, there's that. And also having more space to play in the realm of not being so fixated on an expectation or again an attachment gives us the freedom to have faith. It's like what we were
Mhm.
talking about earlier. Taking that non-attachment away is like, okay, I'm trusting in the unknown. I don't
Mhm.
know what's ahead, but I know that if everyone's at the table, then I can trust a little bit deeper and I can have more faith in humanity because if we're all at the table and we're all treating each other with respect,
Mhm.
we're going to win. We're going to win. Respect, love, and we're not being, if we're
Mhm.
really hearing each other, it'll work out in our favor for good.
Yeah, because it's not gonna be fighting about who's right, or it's just gonna be, I wanna honor, right? We're talking about celebration of culture, like, even if in that small way of just, I honor and hear you, right? That in
Mm,
itself should be a celebration because that's something we've been longing for.
yes.
I think
I see you, right?
yes, yes. We all want to be seen unless you're going through the brunt of it and you want to hide, right? And I think what I'm hearing now is, you do the work on yourself, you face your shadows, you go out there and live your life, expect to be triggered, face those triggers, roll with the punches, try to love as deeply as you can along the way. But I think the ticket to maintaining a youthful disposition in life is to always be curious. And that is the way that we approach
Mm.
learning about each other's cultures is through curiosity.
Well
Find those
said.
similarities. I mean, if you look at every culture, if you look at every religious practice, like, there is so much intertwined there. The words are different, the tone is different, but it's the same, right? We all have some kind of movement. We all, you know what I mean? There's just, like, for me, I always, when I think about culture, I come back to dance. The
Mm,
music is different, the movement is different, but we are all taking that energy and embodying it and celebrating it with those around us. So, coming back to the root of what it means to be human, what it means to celebrate with one another. If you're stuck, if you're like, well, how do I even honor that and celebrate it? Start with something small. What is a part of your culture that you see linked in other cultures?
mm,
Right. And then you can talk to people like, how do you use dance? How do you use herbs? How do you use prayer? How do you come together? Right. And that's how we'll learn to mend these together, so it's not these broken pieces trying to become one. It's
mm.
wholes, whole ones standing next to one another, creating that gate. Like, that's what they keep showing me. It's like we're like in unity in ourselves or in our communities or in our culture, then standing together as these wholes, as these ones are like the gate that's going to keep us protected, that's going to keep us growing and moving forward and transmuting what's happened in the past to be able to step into this new earth.
Hmm. I see this like vision of mycelium network and also just like bridges, right? Like
Mhm.
how do we connect after? So we get the gate, right? We become embodied, we become whole. We're
Mm.
already whole, but how do we like remember that we're whole? Coming back to the
Yes.
remembrance and the reclamation that we are whole and
Mm.
then connecting by being a bridge to the next person.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And maintaining
Mm.
that light, I think that's what's so cool about thinking about the mycelium network keeping us all intertwined is that it's this light membrane, right? That like, how do we keep pumping in this light consciousness, aka information, as Tara always likes to say.
That remembrance piece, that information, that cosmic knowledge for us to ascend, absolutely.
Mm.
But it's the information sharing, it's the storytelling, it's being a space holder for others. And that takes doing so much work within yourself to really hold space for another, but I think that's the practice we want to see among
Mm.
all of us.
Mhm. And I
Love
think the
that.
key there, like the word that just stood up for me when you said was like sharing stories, right?
Mm.
Sharing that information, getting it as close to the source as possible because we see that media takes things and they have their own agenda and they're going elsewhere. So reaching out, like if you can't, for example, Danae, in your lineage, like you couldn't reach to your grandfather, but I'm sure not only in books, but you also reach out to people and like other things like that to actually hear the words of what they're feeling. That's how we get their energy. That's how we get their frequency, is being able to sit with them and say, what is your story?
Mm.
How did that transpire for you?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think something, if y'all like to cook, that just feels like such a fun part of culture, right? Like we need
Mhm.
food to survive. Every indigenous culture, wherever we come from, they were dependent on the earth to get their food, to get their water, to survive. And
Mhm.
so, whether we know anything about our lineage or not, what would it look like for us to stay curious? Again, Victoria, keeping that curiosity alive, going back to the roots of potentially a recipe that could have something to do with
Mhm.
our ethnicity and seeing what awakens with it.
Mhm.
Like, what comes alive in you as you make this thing that your ancestors maybe made?
That pulls me right back to elementary school. Like one of my favorite things we ever did was we each got to teach about our culture and bring a food for that culture. And we all got to taste foods. And it was like, it was more than just like read about this history and share it out. It was like go speak to your relatives. Go find out like what recipes they used. And it was so beautiful to be able, even at like such a young age, to sit in that space and be like, oh, cool. Like I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that about that culture. Wow, this tastes really good. We were like listening to cultural music as we were like eating that food. And I think maybe it's the teacher in me, but even coming back to like that basic of like get together with friends and be like, everybody cook a dish from your heritage and tell us a little bit about it. And if you don't know anything about it, that's okay too. Tell us your experience with, whatever it is that you've experienced. And that's how we start to open that up and be able to unify together because we're literally sitting at the table together. Like we're
Mhm.
literally like this is what we've experienced and this is what comes up for us for that conversation or this dynamic, and it just helps us not only heal but unify as a human race.
Mhm.
1,000%.
I love the idea of
Mm.
sharing food as a way of contributing to those in need. And I think Thanksgiving, the one thing that I do like about this holiday is that there's so many soup kitchens and people out there wanting to give back in some way. And it really it breaks my heart to hear of, so many hungry people out there in the world. And that is like one way that feels so good, and culturally I know that's coming from my family, that desire to want to put food in bellies just as like a way to root them and make them feel loved. And um yeah, so if you're looking for a way to give back this holiday season, donate some food, volunteer at a soup kitchen. I
Mm.
mean, in Portland, I love going out and just leaving food where I know people who are hungry will benefit from it. So,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, Portland has like a fridge. I forget the name, but there's a couple in Beaverton, and my husband and I will drop off food just in these pantries. They have them like they're accessibly up all over the city,
Mhm.
so you can find them and literally just provide
yes.
food to these. Some of them have fridges, some of them are just shelves, and you can place the food there, you can place other items there as well. And then that's an incredible way to feel like you're reciprocating everything that you're being given in return,
Mhm.
and giving it back to community and people that really need it.
Mhm.
Mhm. Back in New York, I volunteered for a community fridge not too far from my where I was living, and it's so beautiful when you actually like connect with that community as like you're restocking the shelves or like checking what's got to go because it's not good anymore, and just seeing them light up to like thank goodness that there is good food that I can access. And for anyone who's looking to do that, something to keep in mind is it's not easy to find like dairy alternatives or gluten alternatives for those who have like special dietary needs. Like that's not really top of priority when we're giving. So if you are willing to do that, that's a really great thing. I know I always put in like dairy free kind of options for those who are looking for that. But it reminds me too of this. I think it was a TikTok or a reel, I don't know, that I saw. And it was an indigenous person talking about Thanksgiving and how if he spoke about 9/11 the way we speak about Thanksgiving, like, oh, it's just a place to gather and all that. And I was like, oof, yeah, that's really hurtful and really harmful. But then it also like I think about what we were talking earlier with that division as an opportunity for unification, and how interesting as a culture we saw something like talk about the duality. We saw the division, and what did we make this holiday about? Gathering, right?
Yeah.
And even though there's no link there, our subconscious, or maybe it was a control game, I don't know, but just switching the script and that duality of like, okay, well, this terrible thing, we're going to talk about unifying and gratitude and gathering and all of that. So I think if we can, not that I want to say this is a good thing because it's not, because that is blinding or like putting blinders on all that did happen, but I also feel like we can take that for the traumas we've experienced and say, okay, how can I take this separation or division and find unity in that respectfully, which we don't tend to do at this holiday, but respectfully bring unity into this space of division and duality.
Mm. Or create your own traditions. Like I personally, I don't
Mhm.
celebrate it. It doesn't feel right for me, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
Part of I believe the reason why so much of information was cut off was because of the genocide that happened. And
Mhm.
to then celebrate it, I like to just go be out in nature. So that's how I celebrate. I am with the earth that day. And
Mhm.
so that feels nourishing for me and my body. And it feels like I'm honoring the land and it feels good for me. And so,
Mhm.
whatever it means for us to revitalize that tradition, whether it be gathering amongst friends and recognizing that yes, that happened and honoring it because you can be together and you can celebrate. You can hold both things and you can find the non-dualistic area rather than
Mhm.
dividing and judging the next person for doing whatever they're doing. If
Mhm.
it feels whole, it's like trusting that embodiment. If it feels
Absolutely.
good for you, then do that thing.
Yeah. And I love what you said about being able to hold both, right? Because that's the whole piece here is being able to unify in both. So if gathering during this time, and first of all, this is a great season of gathering. It should not be focused on this day that was a not great, like a terrible day, right?
Thousand
We
percent.
should be taking this season of harvest. That's why it is the season of gathering, because it is the season of harvesting and having abundance to share with others. Take that as if you like doing that, sure, go for it. But maybe holding space to say, well, let's take a moment to celebrate cultures that
Hmm.
are from this land, that are related to this day, that are in our ancestors, right? Like if you want, I also take time every Thanksgiving to be outside and reconnect and just be like thanking the land. That's where my gratitude comes to, is like, thank you, Mother Earth, for providing this harvest. Even though
Hmm.
I'm not growing it myself, it's being grown somewhere. And thank you for that. Um, but it's about being able to hold both and say, okay, we can gather and we can celebrate culture, but we also need to hold and honor and transmute or be able to like give grace to all of those who suffered.
Hmm. What keeps coming back is like trusting the next person, like trusting your neighbor.
Mm.
And I know that's hard. Victoria, I've struggled with this myself. I know you mentioned it
Mhm.
earlier. This has been it feels like it's a big karmic cycle that I am
Mm.
rewriting for
Mm.
myself. what it means to trust my own intuition and what it means to trust others while not negating how I feel. And
Mm,
how do I stand in my truth and allow someone else to stand in theirs, even if it looks different?
mm.
And really just trust them in their own truth, not try to change them. Like that in itself is like hard because it comes down to the root of like trust
Mhm,
for me. It's like, and it feels like it's this big karmic cycle for a lot of us.
mhm,
I think it's something a lot of us are rewriting for ourselves.
mhm.
Or trust that the truth will be revealed when you're ready to receive it.
Mm,
And that's one of the toughest things to accept because we want to know. We're such an information driven society and we want to know. And if you're not meant to receive it at that time, it's just not going to sit right with you. So I think trusting the timing of when
Absolutely.
you learn the truth of whatever it may be.
so
Mhm.
true. Yeah, I have definitely tried to force truth and it doesn't work.
Nope.
It doesn't work.
Nope. That's when you're like, "Oops, didn't wanna know.
Didn't want to know
Didn't
because
wanna
it,
know."
well, then you learn something else and you're
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I heard you,
Or the
you
truth
know?
is then skewed and you might then go seek the truth from maybe a person that you're feeling like it wasn't truthful in the beginning, right? And it's like you already have these blinders on, you already have your perception made. And I know I'm
Hmm.
guilty of it. I spoke about it, I think 2 episodes ago, in in relation to who I was dating. And it's like, how do we live our lives with an open heart and just fucking love, like, and not have all this other bullshit cloud us down or weigh us down and steer us off our path to unification, to expression of our own divinity, because that's what I'm here for.
Mhm. Mhm.
Amen. So am I. Yeah, amen feels like a word that I've had to reclaim for myself
Yes.
because I grew up,
Yep.
in the church, and it's so interesting. I love that you brought it up earlier because that's what this gets to be for us, like staying curious, keeping ourselves in this creative path of like how do we make things fun? Like how do we play and
Yes.
celebrating our divinity and celebrating how we embody our spiritual essence? Like we are humans experiencing this spiritual experience. So what does it look like to play with it?
Mhm. And I think sometimes when we're trying to explore, other perspectives or other cultures or anything like that, for me, when I start small, I'm like, "Ooh, this is kind of awkward," like whatever. I almost feel like you got to dive in like a kid. You got to have the curiosity and play, like you were both just saying, and just dive right in. You don't know anything about it. Just join someone who's going to have the music and the food and like be talking about it. And you're just like, cool. Like, I have no, like, when we come in with judgment that
Mm,
especially as adults, that we need to have this knowledge already, we close ourselves off, as opposed to just being like, let me be curious, let me have fun with it. And even if that means I have to hold this little bit of like trauma that this culture has gone through, and take a breath and say, okay, now I see that piece of the perspective, I see that piece of why, they work this way, or this, whatever it is. But allowing the playfulness and curiosity to come out of that, I think, go big. For me, it's go big, like jump right into it. Like, where I'm welcomed, join in and be like, teach me everything you know. Like, I want to feel it, I want to live it, I want to, tell me how to paint like you, draw like you, sew like you, like whatever it is, just so I can feel that and really embody that with your understanding, so that way I'm doing it in a way that's honoring you. I'm not just like going to the store and being like, this looks like this culture, let me wear it and play, right? I'm learning from someone, but allow yourself to step into that fully.
And by doing that,
mm.
you're stoking the fire of that person's passion and keeping it going for them. And that is another form of reciprocity that I'd love to see more of.
I think a good question that kind of like keeps coming up for me is like, how do we honor our ancestors
Mm,
and our culture without letting that be a dividing force?
mm,
Like, how do we really just honor all of ourselves so that we can honor each other. I mean, it's kind of like what we've been talking about the whole episode, but I really like the idea of like honoring our ancestors and our culture, but really making sure that it's not a dividing force, because I think that's what's been the program for so many of us for so long.
Danae,
Did
you
it
knew
did it train
exactly
it?
what to say, girl. Um, so I think that comes with being able to not judge yourself, right? Because if you're honoring your ancestors, but you're still judging yourself in any capacity, then you're still going to have judgment outward and you're going to say, I'm separate. When we
Mhm.
can honor ourselves and say, but I'm whole, and so is that person, we begin to honor each other. And something that a teacher of mine said recently that was just like, even, it's one of those things, but someone says it and you're like in a different frequency and you're like, oh shit, is that we come to earth as a soul to unify ourselves inside, right? To say, I'm going to unify, even if you don't make the connection outwardly, but just I'm going to bring my shadow and light together. When we step in and start to unify in ourselves, the first thing we want to do is guide others and be like, this is the right way. This is how, whether it's honoring cultures or dealing with trauma or whatever. And we say, this is how you do it. And what you're doing is you're robbing that
Mm.
soul of their opportunity to unify themselves. So when we get caught in ourselves and we're like, oh, well, this isn't right, they're not doing it right, or I'm not doing it right, what we're not allowing is for any of those souls to unify in themselves. So, as far as like honoring your own culture, but not separating yourself, it starts with understanding that you unifying and coming into your power, whether it be from your culture or, from working with your shadow, whatever it is, that's your power. And that igniting inside you, that like strength you want to push forward, you're stealing that from someone when you tell them that they need to show up a certain way, or
Mm.
when they need to honor this culture or not be a part of this conversation, or or not that they shouldn't honor this culture, but in a specific way where it should really be to what you need. And I think when we start to recognize that, we can sit there and be like, I'm a sovereign being and I want to honor that and I want to embody that. And that's really powerful. And that doesn't take away from that other person.
Mm.
What it does is it allows me to be the mirror, like we were saying early, for that person to then tap into their lineage, into their ancestors, into their culture, and embody that. And then we get to do that together. And what it's doing is, similarly, when two people hit the same note and that amplifies the frequency, we're hitting that same thing, but at a different, like we're playing a different instrument, but we're hitting that same
Mm.
note. And it's so amplified. So when we start to do that in our daily life with those that we interact with and embody our culture, our ancestors, and allow them to do the same, what we're doing is we're hitting that note with different instruments and sending it outward.
Mm. I love that. Being the divine instrument. I had a guest that was talking about that and being the instrument for the divine to play through. And
Mm.
so, what does it look like for us to just stay open and to let the divine speak through us?
Mm-hmm. And I think that starts with learning your ancestry
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how did they connect and how did they let the divine come through them, because that's how they're going to use that same channel to come through you. And that's a good step in honoring your ancestors. I call them into every circle. Join me. Other versions of myself, other
Mm.
ancestors who have walked this land or walked in my bloodline, like join me because I want to honor you. I want you at this table.
Mm.
I'd like to put a little disclaimer or just a new perspective out there. Your ancestors are not always from your ethnicity. And if you look at it from a soul perspective,
Mhm.
you know the cultures, you know in your cellular being where you come from and what lives you've lived and the souls in which you got to experience those cultures with. So while you may not be, you know, Native American in this lifetime, you still might resonate with a lot of the practices of those people, of our people. And just it's a fun little exploration to go within your soul to see what comes about for you. It could be Atlantis, it could be ancient Egypt, it could be Mayan ruins. I mean, there's so much richness within your own soul that when you start to explore what was and what still is on a different timeline, the
Mhm.
world's your oyster.
Absolutely. Because you're carrying from your bloodline, but you're right. You're living simultaneous lifetimes. And I know I've tapped into a couple of mine, God knows how many there are. And every single one, I'm a part of a different culture. So I'm not saying that that means like, oh, I know everything about it, but I have that in me. And there'll be certain things that resonate with me when I'm learning about that practice to go, oh my, this feels so right.
Mm.
This feels familiar. And also, Victoria, you know, our guide group likes to hang out, and they were just pumped because the last thing they wanted to tell me was yes, but also, little plug for you also have a galactic ancestral lineage. And they're like, don't forget about us. Like, there's also otherworldly things that you can connect to and, you know, honor and celebrate their culture. But that's all I'll
I've
say
been
with that.
I love that. I've been praying to my cosmic guides. I'm like, okay, yeah, and like who else?
Yeah.
Because again, it's like stay curious.
Mm-hmm.
The earth is not that old. Bottom line, like say no more. Like I just feel like don't be so close-minded that or do and like wait for the timing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like stay open and
Yeah.
stay curious. I feel like that's the tagline here.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to stay curious. Thank you for that,
Mhm.
Victoria.
Is that our title?
I love that.
Celebrating cultures, continue to stay curious. Oh, see.
I love that.
I feel like we hit it. I feel like that feels good for me.
Hmm.
Me too.
Danae, thank you so much for joining us. I know
Yeah.
that we could not do this topic without
Mhm.
you. So I'm so
Mm.
happy that you're feeling good enough to join us today. We'll have Danae's links below. But Danae, anything that you'd like to share that they can look forward to in the future or where they can reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Unearthing Eve on Instagram or at the.conscious.communion, both on Instagram. The podcast you can find on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. And love also Conscious Communion. So more C's,
Yes.
just bringing it into the mix. And very soon, I will be in California for the majority of December. But when I return, I plan to have some breathwork events
Hmm.
coming soon. So keep a lookout for that as well.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Danae.
Thank you, sweet
Yes, of
sister.
course. Thank
Mhm.
you. This was really, really just nourishing. So thank you.
Hmm.
Get them, like, share, subscribe, prescribe.
Like, share, subscribe, prescribe to your dose of frequency. This is the end of season 3. It has been such a beautiful experience. We've had amazing people join us, and it is time for us to take a little bit of a break because it's what's needed during this season. However, we love you guys so much that we're going to give you a little bonus episode in December. So if you have not yet reached out to us on Instagram to any questions about spirituality, any terms, any concepts or things that have been coming up in your own practice, we're going to do a whole episode answering your questions and we'd love to hear from you. So comment, like, rate, do everything because we love you. Thank
Reviews help
you.
too.
Yeah, reviews.
Give them a review.
Thank you so much. We love
Thank
you.
you.
Love you.
Bye.